They called him unstoppable. Not just talented, not just creative, unstoppable. The man who could look at a pile of rusted scrap and see something no one else could see. Where others saw junk, he saw possibility. Where others saw limits, he saw shapes waiting to be born. For years, millions of people watched Ian Roussel do the impossible. They watched sparks fly, metal bend, and broken machines come back to life under his hands. To the world, he looked calm, confident, in control. But that wasn't the full story. Because behind the cameras, behind the finished builds, behind the quiet smile and steady voice, something else was happening. Something far more dangerous than failure. Success was slowly breaking him. And the moment his body finally gave out, collapsing under a desert sun so brutal it could kill a man in hours, it forced a question he had spent his entire life avoiding. What happens when the thing you love starts destroying you? This is the story no one saw. This is the truth behind the builder who walked away from everything. Long before television, before fame, before anyone outside his hometown knew his name, Ian was just a quiet kid growing up in California. He wasn't interested in the same things other kids were. He didn't dream about sports trophies or office careers. He didn't imagine himself behind a desk or wearing a suit. He imagined shapes, metal shapes, machines that didn't exist yet. His father, Jerry, unknowingly gave him the key. During the day, Jerry worked demanding technical jobs, but at night, their garage became something else entirely. It became a place where rules didn't matter, a place where imagination had weight and form. Jerry brought home leftover aluminum scraps. To most people, it was worthless, but to Ian, it was treasure. By the time he was 8 years old, he wasn't just watching anymore. He was building, small things at first, panels, pieces, experiments, then go-karts, then frames, then entire machines. While other kids were playing, Ian was learning patience, learning failure, learning how metal behaves when pushed too far, learning that creation is never clean, never easy, and never perfect. It takes time. It takes obsession. It takes sacrifice. By the time he was a teenager, he had already spent thousands of hours in that garage. Hours no one saw, hours no one praised, hours that slowly transformed curiosity into mastery. But mastery has a price, and Ian was already paying it. He didn't follow the traditional path. College never appealed to him. He didn't want theories. He wanted reality. He wanted sparks, heat, weight, and resistance. He wanted to build. So he stepped directly into the custom car world, a place filled with legends and gatekeepers. Men who had spent decades earning their reputations. Men who didn't trust newcomers. Ian didn't ask for permission. He just worked. During the day, he learned from anyone willing to teach. At night, he returned to his own projects, pushing himself further than anyone expected. There were nights he didn't sleep. Nights he barely ate. Nights where the only sound in the shop was the hum of tools and his own breathing. Because he understood something most people never realize. If you want to create something truly original, you have to give everything. And eventually people noticed. Not because he advertised, not because he promoted himself, but because his work didn't look like anyone else's. It was strange, raw, unapologetic. He didn't restore cars. He reinvented them. Some people hated it. Some people called it wrong. Others called it genius. Ian didn't care what they called it. He only cared that it was real. But talent alone doesn't guarantee survival. There were times when his shop barely stayed open, times when money ran out, times when he slept on couches surrounded by unfinished builds, wondering if he had made a mistake choosing this life. Most people would have quit. Ian didn't, because quitting would have meant abandoning the only thing that ever made sense to him. Then everything changed. A single build, a single show, a single moment of recognition that would alter the course of his entire life. Suddenly, people weren't just noticing him locally. They were noticing him everywhere. Collectors, fans, producers, and eventually television came calling. When Full Custom Garage first appeared, it didn't look like other shows. It wasn't filled with fake drama or forced personalities. It was simple, honest. It showed the process, the struggle, the transformation. Viewers connected with that honesty. They trusted it. They trusted him. But television has its own rules. Rules no one explains at the beginning. At first, it felt like freedom. Exposure brought opportunity. Opportunity brought money. Money brought stability. For the first time, Ian didn't have to wonder if he would survive. But slowly, something began to change. The cameras didn't just document his work. They began to control it. Deadlines tightened. Expectations grew. Builds that should have taken months were compressed into weeks. Weeks into days. The creative process that once felt limitless began to shrink. What once felt like passion started to feel like pressure. Long filming days became normal. 12 hours. 13 hours. Sometimes longer. The desert heat didn't care about production schedules. It didn't care about ratings. It didn't care about success. Temperatures inside the Mojave Desert shop could climb past 110 degrees. Metal surfaces burned to the touch. Air became thick and heavy. Still, the cameras rolled. Still, Ian worked. Because stopping wasn't an option. Not anymore. And then, one day, his body finally said no. It happened without warning. One moment he was standing. The next he wasn't. The heat had taken more than his comfort. It had taken his strength. His balance, his ability to continue pretending everything was fine. He collapsed. Paramedics arrived. The cameras stopped, but the damage had already been done. Not just to his body, to something deeper, something harder to repair. Because collapse doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, quietly, piece by piece. And Ian wasn't the only one breaking. His wife, Jamie, had been there through everything, not just as a partner in life, but as a partner in survival. She helped manage the work, helped hold everything together, helped carry the invisible weight that comes with building something bigger than yourself. But she was fighting her own battles, battles the audience never saw. The stress, the isolation, the exhaustion, living far from everything, surrounded by heat and silence, takes a toll on the human mind. Success had given them everything they thought they wanted, but it had taken something in return. Peace, health, freedom. And then came another loss. His dog, Dude. To the audience, Dude was just a companion, a familiar presence wandering through builds and workshop moments. To Ian, Dude was stability, consistency, loyalty, through every long night, every stressful deadline, every moment of doubt. Dude was there, and when cancer took him, it wasn't just the loss of a pet. It was the loss of something that had silently held Ian together for years. Grief doesn't announce itself loudly. It seeps in. It changes how you see things. It forces you to confront truths you've been avoiding. Ian had spent his entire life building machines, but now he faced something he couldn't fix. Himself. By late 2023, the decision was no longer optional. He couldn't keep pretending. Couldn't keep sacrificing himself for expectations that were no longer his own. So, he did something few people have the courage to do. He walked away. Not because he failed, but because he understood something most people never learn. Success without control isn't freedom. It's a cage. Leaving meant uncertainty. It meant risk. It meant starting over. But it also meant something else. Choice. He began building again. Not for deadlines. Not for ratings, not for approval, for himself. He launched his own content, his own platform, his own vision. No scripts, no forced timelines, no interference, just creation. And people responded, not because it was polished, but because it was real. For the first time in years, Ian wasn't performing. He was living, even as the television world around him began to shift. Studios closed. Productions ended. Entire systems that once seemed permanent disappeared, including operations connected to Motor Trend Studios and other major players. But Ian had already escaped, already reclaimed what mattered most: freedom. He and Jamie moved into a new workshop, a space designed not for survival, but for sustainability. A space where creativity didn't require suffering. The builds continued, but the pressure didn't. And something unexpected happened. He rediscovered joy. Not the forced excitement of performance. Real joy. The kind that comes from creating without fear. The kind that reminds you why you started in the first place. Looking back, the tragedy wasn't that Ian walked away. The tragedy was that he had been pushed to the point where walking away was the only way to survive. Because for years, the world saw a man living his dream. They didn't see the cost. They didn't see the exhaustion. They didn't see the quiet moments where he wondered if it was all worth it. But walking away didn't end his story. It saved it. Because Ian Roussel didn't stop building. He just stopped building for everyone else. And in doing so, he proved something far more powerful than talent. He proved that the bravest thing a person can do isn't chasing success. It's knowing when to let it go. Not because you failed, but because you finally understood what matters more. And sometimes the strongest builders aren't the ones who hold everything together. They're the ones strong enough to start over. From nothing. Again.